We did something recently that's a little unusual, and you might not have noticed. And today, I want to both tell you a bit about what it is, why we did it, and hear from you what you think. Good morning, Magic. I'm Gavin Verhey from Wizards of the Coast. And among the other things I design, I work a lot on Commander, both helping to lead the format internally at Wizards along with Melissa DeTora, and also making some of our precons. It's certainly not all me by any stretch. We have an amazing design team that brings these to life. And there's one thing that has been a frustrating nuisance for all of us Commander designers for a long time, even since some of the early years of Commander decks: unfinished land cycles. To understand this problem fully, let's look at the past for something a lot of people may not know. Okay, so these days we generally treat all the color combinations equally in terms of rare standard legal dual lands. It has such a huge impact on standard what lands are available. So we either do all 10 dual lands in a single set, like the Murders at Karlov Manor Surveil lands, or we release them over a couple sets, like we did with the Pathways in both Zendikar Rising and then the following set, Kaldheim. So there's only a short gap without them, which can even sometimes be nice to give standard a different feel as new lands enter and it makes a new deck playable. But it hasn't always been this way. For a long time in Magic, allied colors, the pairs next to each other on the back of a Magic card, and enemy colors were treated quite differently. Allied pairs worked together, enemy colors didn't, so the mana followed suit. It might seem like ancient history now, but when the original Painlands debuted in Ice Age in 1995, there were only 5 of them, the ones for the allied colors. It took until 2001 with Apocalypse, hey, I was 11 years old and that was my first pre-release, to get the other 5 enemy ones. In fact, the whole set of Apocalypse was a huge deal because Wizards was making an enemy-colored set full of enemy multicolored cards. These days, we get them pretty much every set, but until that point, there were barely any in all of Magic. You see, when the set Legends premiered multicolored cards, they were all either allied colors or a 3-color combination of a color and its 2 allies. Fun pop quiz actually, do you know when the first enemy colored card appeared? It was the Dark with the singular Dark Heart of the Wood, but other than that card, every color combination didn't even get an enemy colored multicolored card until Mirage Block. And from then until Apocalypse, that was pretty much it, other than a couple stray cards like Selena, the Archangel. Alright, so a fun bit of Magic history, but let's go back to the lands. So yes, the Painlands were eventually completed and that was a big deal, but for a long time this continued to be our philosophy, and many other land cycles have ended up stranded like this. In standard sets even as recent as Amonkhet in 2017, which was, that can't be right, 7 years ago, we had the Bicycle lands, which only ended up with the allied colors. Okay, that's a lot of history. Now let me get to the actual point since you have the context of why. When we're making Commander mana bases, it's nice to have access to as many options as possible, especially for lands that can enter untapped. And by choosing an enemy color base, this weird thing happens where you end up with fewer total dual lands. If I'm making a green-white or green-white-blue deck, there just are more dual lands across all of Magic than if I'm making a blue-red or blue-red-white deck. This has been a design problem for a long time, which has been made even trickier by our recent Universes Beyond decks. Huh? Well, one thing when making a Universes Beyond deck is that everything inside appears in the setting we're working with. For example, cards like Is It Signet or Kodama's Reach can't show up in Universes Beyond decks because those are Magic names, whereas Talisman of Creativity and Cultivate can because they can be concepted to appear in that world. We haven't pulled the ripcord on something like the Godzilla overlay treatment for Commander decks yet. Maybe we will someday. You can let me know what you think in the comments down below. But for the moment, certain names lock you out of these decks. And when it comes to lands, that poses a bit of a challenge. Adakar Wastes, Caves of Koilos, Shivan Reef, Yavimaya Coast, Carplusian Forest, all out. Ravnica Bounce lands, out. A smorgasbord of other lands from Razorverge Thicket to Krosan Verge, not to mention a host of monocolored lands like Bojuka Bog and Urborg, those are out too. And it's not just the names to watch out for, by the way. With creature lands, you need to watch for what they turn into. With Restless Ridgeline, for example, do you have dinosaurs in your world? If not, that's not gonna fly. And speaking of dinosaurs, there's also Dragon Skull Summit, the one card in that 10 dual land cycle which has caused us endless problems for years. Even when we wanted to print it in our own world of Ixalan, we literally had to make the flavor text explain how it's a Dragon Skull Summit on a world with no dragons. Nice one, Angrath. We usually find a way to make this one work, but it can be tough. I remember combing through Doctor Who lore trying to find the one time there was a dragon. So because of all of this, the Commander design team decided we wanted to try something. Taking an old dual land cycle we had absolutely no plans to finish and finish it. If nobody was ever going to do it, we should just do it. And once we did it the first time, they would be open to using precons in perpetuity. So we looked around for an untapped cycle, what we're often looking for the most that Standard was definitely not going to do, and settled on the Odyssey filter lands. Standard, you've had 22 years to finish these, I think we're safe. But just to really be safe, we double checked with the Standard team, they told us absolutely not, and so everybody got on board, and Annie Sardellis, lead of the Fallout Commander decks, deployed them there. A place we were happy with since all 5 enemy color combinations could be represented across the decks. And since the purpose of these is to be reprinted repeatedly in Commander decks, we then immediately followed with them in Outlaws of Thunder Junction Commander, both because they help the mana and also just to assuage any fears these would be Universes Beyond only. So in the history of Commander decks, we've never done much in the way of making new dual lands. But if people think this goes well, it potentially opens us up for more of these in the future. Whether finishing cycles, printing some new one-ofs like the Lorwyn type lands if there's a type that wants it, or even potentially making whole new dual land cycles just for Commander. It's all something that could be on the table. And finally, I do want to say, because I know the comments are going to bring it up, there are some land cycles, like the Battle Bond lands, that aren't in precons right now and I get asked about all the time. I'm very aware and sounds like a topic for another video someday. But even if we did do those, we'd still want access to as many new lands as possible. So that's a small, but new thing we've been doing in Commander design. I'd really love to know what you think about this. Should we do more like this? Would you only want to see us finish old cycles? Or starting new ones cool too? Which lands would you want to see this done for the most? Let me know in the comments down below. I'll talk with you again soon. And in the meantime, may you draw all the lands you need to cast your spells. You got this. And so after a bunch of design work, now you'll found it in Outlaws of Thunder Junction Commander in the token section of each deck. Let me walk you through how it works. First, you need at least 6 total bounties. There's 3 per deck, so with just the ones from 2 decks you can play, or if you or your friends grab all the decks between you, you can toss all the bounties in the center and shuffle them up. And